welcome everybody to the Red Canary office hours. I'm hosting solo. My crutch, Keith, is on spring break this week. Before I kick off here, I do want to throw out here for anyone that's listening. I love to drop cultural references like song lyrics and movie quotes when I'm talking. I have permission and blessing from our marketing team that if you hear me do that, the first person in the chat to provide the next line will get some free swag. So keep your ears open. Joining me today, thank you, Jimmy. This would have been super boring if I'd had to sit here and talk all by myself, but Jimmy Astle, our Senior Director of Validation and Data Science, an all-around amazing dude, is joining us. He's the brains behind how we're applying AI within Red Canary, and we've got a lot queued up. It's going to be super interesting to talk about. So thanks for joining us, Jimmy. I'm Dave Farrow, CISO Red Canary. The details of my life are quite inconsequential. If you've been here before, you know who I am. All right, let's jump into it. There we go. Our docket today, we're going to talk about questions from the mailbag. Some of them have AI impacts and some of them don't. And then we're going to jump into what we're finding here, applying AI and ML and data science in our security operations. So let's jump in. First question from a mailbag came from Raul earlier in the month. Is Red Canary still tracking Russian APTs? Jimmy, what do you want to say about that?
I would say yes, we absolutely are, Dave. But not so much from the attribution side, much more so from studying the behaviors of all these types of APTs that sort of make the news or that we're aware of, finding those clusters and ultimately ensuring that we have the right technologies and visibility into detecting those threats, right? So attribution is really important, but at Red Canary, we don't focus a ton on very specific infrastructure tracking or this is Fancy Bear 25 and those sort of things. We very much are aware of them and leverage all of the great intelligence around these attributed APTs, I guess is a good way to put it, to make, to fortify our defenses and our detection technologies.
Yeah, that was one of the things that it took me a while to get my head around when I was really understanding where Red Canary fit. This is me talking from when I was a customer. Way to go, Sarah. Thank you for catching that quote. You're going to get some swag. Just Sarah, make sure you drop in there who the speaker was on that quote. When I was a customer earlier, like I wanted Red Canary to do all the things for all of my security tooling, all right? But really where we focused is on detection and response. So knowing, the behaviors of things that are happening is more important to us than who those folks are. At the end of the day, like, does it matter from a defender's perspective in the initial response who it is that's attacking you? It matters a little bit in knowing where they're likely to go next so that you know
Yes.
where to apply your defense. But a lot of the attribution stuff, like when you're talking with your board about who's attacking us, there's not a lot you can do about that, right? And so it's kind of more of I call it after dinner conversation. There are people that care about or that are probably more sensitive to who's attacking them than our customers are. But the majority of our customers either aren't being targeted by an APT or the fact that they are is going to be a secondary fact in their response and recovery. And it's not something that we focus on so much on the detection side other than how they behave.
Yeah, well put.
Cool. Next question. Oh, I'm in control of this. All right. We're gonna do this question twice because Keith's on vacation and I know that he cares about this, but I wanted to get Jimmy's take on this. So Jimmy, speed round here. You only get 3 tools to keep in your security stack. What are they and why? Thank you, Chris Brown, for this.
Yeah, this is a fantastic question. My blink reaction to this, and I might not use the right Gartner terminology, but I would say I need EDR or XDR, some XDR EDR platform for the endpoint cloud resource observability. I want some sort of identity observability IDP thing, Okta, Entra, that sort of thing, Duo. And then I would say some sort of SASE zero trust enforcement network layer observability tool. I'm thinking like a Zscaler or some of the Microsoft tools. So that's my blink reaction on the three security tools.
Interesting. And that network visibility tool, that's something that needs to work in a distributed environment, right?
Oh yeah, definitely.
Okay, cool. My three are similar. Um, I don't want to limit my detection and response to just endpoint because as we're seeing, obviously, people are moving into other domains like identity and cloud, and I'm sure that there are other domains that are coming after this. So a detection and response capability is one tool. Um, I would switch up the nuance a little bit on the IDP side. I want an IDP with observability, but I care strongly about the ability to enforce secondary factors and device trust and all of the modern things around identity and being able to drive federated identity across everything that you're working on. So an identity management tool is absolutely essential. And the last one, I go back and forth on a general network level, or my third is actually a CSPM tool, something like Wiz.
Yep.
I've got crown jewels in a lot of other places that I care about for observability, but at the end of the day, like our platform, if you work in a SaaS product business, having clear visibility into the configuration and your ability to actually manage the resources in your cloud is it comes ahead of those other things if I had to choose.
Yeah, it definitely depends on their segments. Like a cloud native company, like you said, absolutely. Something like Wiz is the Swiss Army knife of observability in the cloud, from my experience.
Yep. Hang on. There was a question in the chat from the previous question I'm going to go back to real quick. Elizabeth asked, with APTs that have associated definitions in a dictionary, have you run into issues with the software incorrectly or not identifying the threat?
Oh yeah,
Okay.
Elizabeth, this I've experienced this misattribution a lot with static IOCs. For example, this IP address is a Russian IP address, right? And big name security vendors will have alerts that come through and says, Russian actor or Russian state thing caught, right? And you look at it, and all it literally is someone logging in from an IP address, and that's all you have, or a machine making a connection to that IP address. And then every time I run one of those down, it's just some ephemeral proxy service that got reused, and it wasn't actually the Russian, actor that you thought. Come on, they're an APT. They're not going to get caught with a simple IP address IOC that's probably been known for months now, right? That was my experience. Dave, what do you have?
Uh, I probably to my shame, I have always in my career counted on Red Canary to do that for me. And I'll give this plug over and over again. Like if you look at the CISO mind map, at the number of things that someone in my seat has to cover, security operations is a super critical, super labor intensive and hard to cover piece. And I've only been able to make significant progress on the other parts when I've had a partner on this. So I've very much leaned on my partnership with Red Canary throughout my career.
Yeah. Yeah, Elizabeth, that's a good question. And it's a really hard nut to crack. There's no deterministic way to tell you if you're an APT unless you work at a three-letter agency, in my opinion.
Awesome. Awesome. Before we move off this, Tristan, glad that cluing you into CSPMs was valuable to you. I will tell you, just look at Wiz, right? I mean, the others you might look at as Orca and Laceworks, but Wiz is the current hotness in that space. And Jimmy and I were just talking before we came on. We hope that the Google purchase of them isn't the demise um, of them as a tool, but they're a fantastic security tool.
Yeah.
And then there was another one here around Ankur. You asked about how AI agents or AI in general is helping detection and response. That's what the rest of this call is going to be about. So we're going to get to your question. All right. Cool. Next question here. And we're going to tee up where we're going for the rest of our conversation today. How is Red Canary helping with identity-related detections, primarily from the suite of Microsoft Intra-related tools? We're going to talk about AI in a more general application after this, but this is actually the place that I get really excited about. So,
Yeah.
Jim, what's your take on this? Thank you for the question, Scott.
This is the fantastic tee up, and we are investing a ton of our smarts and our expertise into understanding how we can deliver the highest quality sort of identity investigations and detection in the market, right? And we started actually with our Microsoft integrations, so Entra or Sentinel, and that I would say is some of our strongest AI agent workflows that we have in market today. And we can go into sort of whatever kind of detail you want here, Dave, but there's a really good blog. Thank you for whoever posted that. So that blog I wrote in the beginning of the year to kind of demystify what the heck AI agents are and to actually show the world that, like, no kidding, this isn't hype. We are seeing a significant increase in timeliness, meaning the time to detect a true positive, but also in the accuracy. And typically you don't get those both at the same time, right? And so you might ask, oh, of course you guys are going to say that, you're Red Canary, but you guys are experts in all of these things. But how is it helpful? Give me some use cases. So that blog, no kidding, walks you through some of the hardest parts. What have I found in my role in doing identity detection and response and then overlaying machine learning and AI on top of that? When it comes to endpoint, my background is in network and then endpoint security, did that for a really long time, and then really started digging into the cloud and identity space here at Red Canary when I joined almost 4 years ago now. And what we found is that on the endpoint side, it's really easy. There's all these static indicators, PowerShell making this command line, the parent-child relationships. Those are really rich features that you can use to detect threats. In the identity and cloud world, that's not nearly the case. You're like, cool, Jimmy logged in from California, right? I live in Massachusetts. That's probably an anomaly. But hey, we were having an offsite or I was visiting a customer. That's completely normal. And what we found is that humans are just random. We take our laptops and our phones with us everywhere and accessing work systems. And so it's been really hard to sort of figure out how do we build detections on identity of the same quality that Red Canary expects out of all of our other products, and balance that sort of trade-off between true positives and false positives. And I will tell you, false positives in the identity area is a very kind of gray area. And if we were to sort of say, yeah, my user typically uses hide my ass VPN to log into Workday, like that is a risk that we're not willing to accept. So, long story short, Dave, we can dive into more specifics on the AI side, is that we are investing a ton in sort of leveraging the tools we have available to us now to really fortify and increase the quality of our identity investigations across the board. And yes, Entra is absolutely part of that. And if you plug in your Entra data into our platform, you will start to see that right away.
That's super cool. All right, thank
Yeah.
you, thank you for that. We're gonna tee up next use this as a segue into our general conversation about like where we're winning in AI. Before we do that, I would love to see the results of the poll. All right. I love that nobody specifically answered that they were worried about AI eliminating either their job or their team's jobs. I think
Yes.
that's great. For the amount of work that I know that my team and I have had over my career, I think that we need the help. And I think that AI, when applied well, is going to reduce toil. And I think that's what we're going to dig into here. And it's going to make us better, stronger, faster. But I think that the predictions of the demise of SOC analysts are greatly exaggerated.
Agree.
Cool. Thank you for sharing that. All right. We're going to dig in next to sort of Jimmy, your experience in building out AI and ML in our organization. And one of the things I love about Red Canary's approach is we take an incredibly pragmatic approach to actually identifying threats. And so I'm going to tee up this next slide here. I would love you just to talk through um, what we're finding and
Yeah.
where we haven't found results and why you think that is.
Yeah. This is the $1 million slide, Dave. We could talk the entire time on this slide, to be honest. Um, So we started tuning GPT-2 models before ChatGPT was cool with our intelligence profiles. And you could see it. It would spit out, we tell it, generate a new intelligence profile. And it would. And it was complete gibberish, but you could tell that there was something here, right? And then GPT-3 came along, and 3.5 came along, and then ChatGPT came along, and here we are, right? And so we've been experimenting with this technology for a while. And this is like a pretty cut and dry high level view of where we're seeing the value in these tools today. So detecting threats with generative AI, I would I would recommend never to do that. Remember, these large language models are stochastic, meaning they're random. If you ask the same question 10 times, you're going to get 8.5 correct, similar answers. And there's ways that you can get predictive deterministic output out of these models, but they are non-deterministic. Meaning, if you want to detect the same threat with the same signature or using an LLM to do that, it is not going to do it for you in a reliable manner, and therefore you should definitely not use it. And detection and validation kind of are like peanut butter and jelly, right? Like validation is a very precise thing. You're going to need to write code to do some of that. You're going to want to make sure types are the right thing. And I would not leave it solely up to a robot or an LLM to do that type of analysis and trust it, right?
Yeah, so my understanding of an LLM, like you said, is that it predicts what the likely outcome is. And like that's not what you want to do when you're detecting, right?
Correct. Yes.
Right.
Yes.
You
And
you
remember,
want to detect for sure, but when you're talking about like providing context about what you found and putting that in human readable format, then that's when using an LLM kind of seems to
yeah.
make sense to me. And by the way, I'm not
Yeah.
an AI expert, so if I'm
But
saying dumb
Dave,
stuff, say so.
no, your point is perfect. And like you said, it predicts tokens, but it's predicting those tokens based on the knowledge that it has embedded in it. So if you're using a really strong model like GPT-4o, you're probably going to get a much more accurate detection answer. It's not going to be correct. What I would say, most of the time it might be correct, versus like a very small open source model that's going to be all over the place, right? So there's a ton of architecture trade-offs in there and how to make this better. But yeah,
But
the point,
for it to predict detections, that LLM would need to be trained on like the log data that contains
that's
the
right.
telemetry, right?
And it would need dozens of examples. It would need augmented knowledge and access to that augmented knowledge for it to have the latest up-to-date trends and threats that it should be able to detect. So yeah, and that's typically the industry term of saying I'm training the LLM. No one's actually training the LLM on their data. You can fine tune, but you're not building a net new model. You're still building off of a base model. And the key is you augment the data with all of your company data, right? And that's that technique of retrieval augmented generation.
Got it. So we think about having a large language model in the SOC here. Is that different than like a machine learning model?
Yes, very much so. Yeah, right. So machine learning, you typically have like natural language models or supervised or unsupervised models, I guess is a better way to put it. Where you have a big, huge data set with lots of examples, and you train and train and train and train, and then you test on a validation set and a holdout set, and that's your supervised. The unsupervised is more like anomaly detection. I have this algorithm that I want to use, and I want to apply it to a data set, and it will say, here's the anomalies in the data set, right? LLMs are part of machine learning as a whole, but they're much more in like the natural language processing field. And like I would say, one is deterministic and one isn't. And that's the huge difference between the two. That's why we can use ML to detect threats, but not generative AI.
Got it. Got it. So how does the generative AI help with triage and investigation?
Yes. So when you look at things like triage, investigation, remediate, and response in the SOC, what are those? When you eliminate the generative AI technology magic on it, but what are those in their most simplest form? They're just procedures, right? With a knowledge worker's kind of experience backing all of that up, right? And so, an intern fresh out of college doing, investigation, it's not going to be nearly as good as a seasoned SOC analyst that's been in that seat for years and understands all the intricacies of making those decisions, right? And so, when you apply AI with a human in the loop in those areas, it can help do the busy work. Maybe you have a 10-step triage process. Well, have the AI do 4 of them, because most of those are just retrieving data and summarizing what it found, right? And you can kind of apply that to everywhere in those areas.
Okay, cool. Sorry, I was just going and looking for an article that I was reading yesterday about an open source API for allowing language models to reach out to other services.
Yeah.
And I was reading through the threat model on that, and I'm trying to remember the actual algorithm. Do you know which API or which protocol I'm talking about?
Is this the MCP stuff from Anthropic?
Yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
yeah.
Oh, yeah. And we are experimenting a lot with that internally today. That is going to be the next big stepwise function in allowing AI to be smarter and make more autonomous decisions that are more accurate.
Okay. So when you look at these AI servers, this is was a brand new topic to me when I started reading about it yesterday. These AI servers, are people looking at running these things locally as sort of agents on their own machines? And how
Yes,
are you
that.
guys thinking about that from a threat perspective?
Yeah, so just a high level, these MCPs, right, are there's a server and a client side to it. And the client side is where like you would implement an agent or something that knows how to use the tools that are implemented in these MCP services. The server is where the magic happens. Right now, everyone's kind of figuring out how to use these things, the best applications for them, and they run them locally, usually in a Docker container, right? And then your client would connect to it. But you can see where this is all going. At least I do, and I'll take a second to explain that. Yes, the big cloud providers of the world, the red canaries, will have an MCP service that AI agents can interface with, and they have tools available to them like show me all the recent threats, find me high severity threats, like very generic tooling concepts these agents can use, and it will obfuscate how that data is retrieved. So think of it as like the USB plug for AI agents plugging in data to these AI agents. It's a universal protocol that AI agents can use to retrieve data to augment their knowledge to make them smarter and better at what they do, right? And so that's the big breakthrough from a threat modeling perspective, Dave. Oh my God. Like I would think of it as any other sort of API. You need to have strict kind of filtering hitting it, role-based access control on things. And yeah, data access issues certainly is a gray area here, right? Because your AI agent is definitely going to have more access than your typical user because it needs to go access, backend systems or other data or aggregated data. But your customer facing stuff would not want to see that. And you definitely want to segment it per customer. You don't want to ever bleed that data together. And so that is an area that I don't think anyone is starting to explore yet.
Do you think anybody's thinking about running these AI servers locally? Like the use case behind this that I'm thinking about is like I've gotten uh, a request for us to look at something like Glean,
Yeah.
which we would wire up to our Google Docs, all of our G Suite, wire it up to all of our Confluence and Jira, and so we can interact in natural language with all of that data across our organization, right?
Yeah.
Um, I don't want another cloud vendor that has access to absolutely everything. And so one possible deployment model is one of these AI servers running locally on my
That's right.
machine that's piggybacking off my personal access to those things.
That's
And
right.
I just don't have a sense for whether local machines have the resources today to run stuff like that. And if so, what's the way that we're thinking about like threat modeling around that? Because I mean, you land in one of those things and you're going to have a lot of access.
Yeah, agree. What you're going to see how this will work is those tools will be provided as like a proxy in some SaaS solution. You will not see them locally unless someone, like you were saying, figures out, performance constraints and things on an endpoint. But um, I think that the risk still lives there today. I was talking to a customer that uses one of these enterprise grade AI tools where they can feed all of their information into it and chat with it all and build little chat bots and things. And they were saying that, yeah, the risk is that someone lands in this tool, an adversary gets an API key into this tool or whatever it may be, or hijacks my account, right? Um, it makes the enumeration stages and finding the crown jewels just that much easier, right?
Yep.
Where that's the hardest part. Once an adversary gets in, they got to figure out the lay of the land and where to go. Well, if
Right.
I have a robot that I can interface with, that I can just
Yeah,
ask the
right.
question, where is all the payroll data? Oh, it's over here in this folder. You're like, perfect, thank you, right? Like, and
Yeah.
so, but then that brings up a whole other area that's evolving of like, should a company like Red Canary monitor those services and provide an MDR for AI? Like, is that a thing? Should that be a thing? Is that what we will evolve to? Right? Like,
Yeah,
it's an
so I
interesting.
suspect that we're going to have to, right? Because
Yeah,
as we lock down endpoints, right, we're seeing adversaries moving to identity. As we get identity detection response commoditized, and like we know how to find bad behavior, adversaries is going to move to a place where there's less visibility.
you got it. Yep, and that's the history of cybersecurity. They just move somewhere else, right?
Yeah, yeah. Dang it. And I had another question that I wanted to wrap with. Oh, yes, here's what it was. One of the things that I remember you talking about, just take a minute if you would, is that when we do endpoint detection and response, the window that we have to look at on an endpoint is relatively small for
Yep.
identifying a pattern of behavior that we can confidently say is malicious. That window seems to be significantly larger for identity.
Oh yeah.
And like if we didn't have this AI tooling now, how well would we be able to actually stitch together those correlations over such a broad window?
Yeah, that's a good question. So this is a data engineering problem first and foremost, right? But then how you give access to that data. In that blog post, I talked about a lot of this data is in desperate systems. So as a security analyst, I either need to invest in tooling to build that single pane of glass. But even then, I still have to go through all of that data and make sense of it. And sure, I could build filtered views and very static things for those investigations, but we found time and time again that very rarely are all identity investigations the same. At a high level, they are, but when you're really looking into an anomalous travel, anomalous token, you know, impossible travel, there's a lot of different pieces of data that you have to stitch together, but then making sense of that data is even harder, right? Like,
Yeah.
unless you're a seasoned professional, you sat in that seat and you looked at all that data time and time, 1,000 times over months, okay, you can make sense of it. What we're finding is you can take all of that data, explain to the AI what all of that data means, and you can get a nice bite-sized chunk. Hey, I did a user baseline. Here's what's normal for this user over a 90-day period. Here was the anomalous behavior. Here's why I think that behavior is anomalous. Here's some suggested areas of where you should go look. I'm going to go look at those things for you. Based on that, here are the other areas that I found interesting. That's what our detection engineers are presented with today natively, which allow them to make decisions much more accurately and quickly instead of doing that all manually, right?
Yeah, yeah. So I mean, you just rattled through a metric buttload. That's a technical
Yeah.
term of toil, right?
Yes.
And reducing that toil so that the human in the loop can say, is this really anomalous or not? And hey, you've pulled all the information so I can make a decision. That toil reduction is going to make us stronger, better, and faster. We are at the end of our time here. Would love to keep talking with you, Jimmy. It's always a blast to talk with you. We are still needing additional questions in our mailbag. We're running low, so feel free to send those in to officehours@redcanary.com. And thank you to everyone who joined today, and we look forward to talking with you all again. Thanks, Jimmy.
Yeah. Thanks, Dave.